Hi everyone, welcome back. So today I opened Instagram and decided I'm going to recreate the first thing that shows up on my feed. No planning, no safe option, just pure creative risk. And of course, the first thing I see is this iconic Schiaparelli-inspired fake hummingbird necklace. Oh my god. Sculpture, dramatic, slightly surreal. For a second, I thought, why does Instagram think that I can create this? But then I looked at the bold structure, the crystal detailing, the way it sits like a statement on the neckline, and I knew I had to try. I wanted to reinterpret in my own edgy way. So this is me turning a random scroll into full-on fashion experiment. I'm starting with the bird nest, the round crystal base that sits just beneath the bird's head. It isn't completely flat, it has a subtle three-dimension form, almost like a soft dome. To achieve that shape, I'm using a paper pasting and carefully cutting it out by hand. I'm not using traditional jewelry making techniques. I don't have professional machines or molding tools. So, this entire piece is about working with what I have and trusting the construction process. The process taught me more than what I expected. It made me realize maybe next time I want to explore proper jewelry making techniques. Maybe even use professional tools and machines. At least once, I want to try building something like this with technical precision. Once I secure the structure properly with tape, the cone-like base start to take form, and it already feels promising. For the crystals, I have two types, one larger statement stone and one smaller one. It's definitely not identical to the original Schiaparelli piece, but this isn't about perfect replication. It's about reinterpretation, and I continued. So I continue with what I have with me right now, adjusting endlessly, failed repeatedly, and still enjoyed every single moment of it. Even the mistakes felt like process. Yet there's something special about creating with limitation. This challenge pulled me in completely. I was glued to the process. Sometimes literally I worked overnight. After placing two clean rows of crystal, the nest began to look structured and refined. The repetition adds depth and slowly the form feels intentional. Since the necklace features three birds, I repeat the same process three times, ensuring each nest has balance and proportion. Once all the three bases completed, I trim the excess edges and clean everything up to sharpen the silhouette. But at this stage, the nest feels slightly too minimal. They needs movement, something that feels like crystal gently flying around the bird's head. To create the effect, I use the smaller crystal. I can't use the chain as it is, so I carefully separated the stones and treated them almost like tiny component. Threading them with individually into a zero point 0.3 copper wire. It's delicate work, but it allows me to create the floating illusion. If you look closely at the scapular neck piece, you'd notice crystals dispersed around the bird's head, adding dimension and drama. I'm not recreating it at that intricate level, but I'm incorporating a few suspended crystals to enhance the overall composition. I gently peer a small hole into the nest base, insert the wire crystal, and secure them firmly. And slowly it started to transform. I may not have professional equipment, but sometimes creativity isn't about tool. It's about intention. And at this point, I'm trusting the process completely. And now we add the suspended crystals around the bird nest, just enough to create that delicate floating effect. And once they're in place, it finally looks exactly the way I imagined. Now that the crystal nets are ready, it's time to move on to the bird themselves. For the base, I'm using a styrofoam block and a sharp blade to carefully curve out the shape. At first, I was confused about which bird to create. I didn't want to simply replicate a hummingbird, even though I loved the elegance of its long beak. Then I thought about making a raven, my favorite bird. But raven don't have elongated silhouette. I decided to create something in between. A generic long beaked bird, undefined, almost symbolic. I don't even know what species it is, but sometimes design doesn't need a label. Before moving forward, I do a quick fitting to check if the bird fits properly inside the nest. And thankfully, it fits perfectly. Proportion, balance, and everything feels aligned. But shaping the form is only the beginning. Now it's time to bring texture and life into it. Initially, I planned to cover the birds with fox fur and then paint them black for a soft, dramatic finish. But that idea failed completely. The texture looked messy and heavy, not refined, not couture. So I had to rethink everything. So I chose to cover the bird entirely with feathers. But before switching to feathers, I actually tried covering the bird with fox fur. I glued it down using Fevicol and even used the leftover backing from the fur to strengthen the base of the bird. Then, with a brush, I carefully applied glue and layered the fur in to build textures. At first, it looked soft and promising. The texture had potential, but the moment I started adding color, my entire vision collapsed. It didn't look refined at all. I tried saving it by adding shading to create depth, hoping it would elevate the surface, but that failed too. That's when I realized I had to let go of the idea and start over, and that's how I decided to move forward with feathers. But since I couldn't order feathers in time, I gathered small feathers from my pet pigeons. They were naturally the perfect scale for these miniature birds, almost like it was meant to be. And honestly, once covered in feathers, the bird looked far more beautiful and organic than the bare styrofoam structure. I began by securing each bird into its crystal nests using all purpose glue. Then comes the most delicate part, hand placing every single feather. One by one, controlling the glue was challenge. Sometimes too much, sometimes too little. I rained several feather adjusting, rearranging, and correcting placement. But with patience, the texture slowly becomes seamless and dimensional. Every minute spent refining this piece feels intentional. And finally, to complete the bird, I used large oval crystal for the eyes. The final detail gives them presence. Suddenly, they feel alive. I was confused whether to keep the eyes black or add crystals, but in the end, I chose crystals. And just like that, all three birds are complete. And they look stunning, at least in my opinion. Now for the final part of the necklace, the straps. For this section, I'm working with four different type of crystals: large round, small round, large oval, and small oval stones. This part is more about compositioning and construction, carefully gluing each crystal into a fluid balanced shape. I began with a chain of smaller crystal to create flexibility and rhythm, then finished the segment with a bold large round stone to anchor the design. It may look repetitive, almost meditative, just placing crystal one by one. So while I work, I keep thinking about this entire journey. When I first saw this piece on Instagram, I genuinely doubted whether I could recreate anything close to it. I have never made a structured neck piece like this before. I was skeptical, slightly intimidated, and unsure of my own skill. But as I moved step by step, carving, layering, gluing, correcting mistakes, I slowly began to understand the mechanics behind it. Now that all the individual elements are ready, it's time to assemble everything and give it its final form. I don't have a full recording of the joining process because I was experimenting with different ways to secure it, and in the middle of the figuring out, I completely forgot to fill. But you can still see glimpses of it coming together, slowly transforming from separate components into one cohesive statement piece. And that's the beauty of creation. It doesn't have to be perfect or polished or professionally engineered. Sometimes it just had to begin. From a random scroll to a finished neckpiece, this was more than recreation. It was proof that you don't need perfect tools to create something powerful. You just need the courage to try. And now, this is the final piece. From a random scroll on Instagram to a fully formed statement neckpiece, every crystal, every feather, every small imperfection has become part of the story. It may not be an exact couture replica, but it carries something even more personal: experimentation, patience, and growth. This project reminded me that creativity isn't about having perfect tools, it's about having the courage to begin and the persistence to continue. So that's all for today. We will meet in our next video. Until then, bye bye.